Hey guys, this is a weekly forecast for December 26th through the 30th of 2022. Okay, we'll start off with the Aussie Eurjpy.
Okay, this is a weekly chart. Let's start off with an overview of the current setup I was looking at. So the last weekly long trade, that form was right here. And the last weekly short trade, that form was right here, about 3 months ago. And then as price fell down to these levels right here, right at this point, if you recall, there was daily confirmation of strong short strength, which confirmed this weekly bias to be short. Or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high right here. And so if you recall, I was waiting for a pullback right up to these 96.70 levels around right here to take a short entry with the stop loss at this pivot high and its main target right at this level right here. However, I did not get that pullback, and price just went straight down to its main target. And just this week, the main target was hit right here. Okay, so let's go ahead and review this setup real quick. Let's go over to the daily chart. Okay, so on this daily chart, try drawing this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. Right at this point right here, we got a break out and immediate break back in, confirming normal long strength. However, price came right back down to that pivot low to confirm strong short strength, and thus confirming that weekly bias to be short. Then right after that, we got a nice pullback up to these levels, just shy of my entry point, which is at 96.70 or roughly around here. And then price just continued down to its main target and hit its main target this week at this price level. Okay, and one thing I do want to mention is that if you look at this price action right here, and you can see there's many rejection candles. Okay, rejection candle is basically a hammer. So there's a very high wick to the top side. Now this type of price action shows a lot of selling strength, and it often precedes a nice fall down. Okay, so when you see a lot of consecutive rejection candles, like in this case right here, remember that there's a high probability that at some breaking point, the buyers will give way and price will descend. Okay, and this could also happen in the opposite direction, which is long. But in that case, we want consecutive rejection candles to the upside. So in other words, long wicks on the downside. Okay, so the Aussie Yen's bias is reset at this point, and I'll be looking for further weekly and daily biases to form, and I'll keep you guys updated. All right, let's go on to the Euro Yen pair. Okay, and if you're having trouble understanding what I'm talking about in terms of biases and lower confirmations, please check out my forecast manual, which is an instruction book that helps you better understand these forecasts. So if you don't understand a term I'm using or a concept I'm explaining, you can look it up in the manual. Okay, and the link for that is in the details section of this video. Okay, this is a weekly chart. Let's start off with an overview of the current setup I was looking at. So the last weekly long trade, that form was right here. And the last weekly short trade, that form was right here about 2 months ago. And then as price fell down to this level right here, initially we got confirmation of strong short strength on the 4-hour chart. Okay, so at this point, this weekly bias was short. Or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. However, the following week, right at this level right here, we had confirmation of strong long strength that formed. Okay, so if you recall my midweek analysis, I was mentioning if I get a pullback to this 141.70 levels right here, I'll be willing to take a long entry with a stop loss at this pivot low and its main target at this pivot high. However, that said, I also mentioned last week that if last week's weekly candle right here ends up with a green candle, or in other words, if the close is above the open, that's going to be a new weekly long trade. And when a new trade forms within a given bias, the lower time frame confirmations are reset. Okay. And then sure enough, we did get that new weekly long trade right here, which reset the lower confirmations. And thus when price pulled back to that entry level I was mentioning, I did not take this long entry. Okay, and these resettings of biases through new trades is explained in the intermediate course. Okay, so let's go ahead and review this setup also. Let's go over to the 4-hour chart. Okay, so on this 4-hour chart, you're on this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. Okay, right at these levels right here, we're going to break out an immediate break back in. Let me go ahead and zoom in on this so you can see this. All right, so that trend line I just showed you runs right through these levels right here. Then right at this level right here, we got to break out an immediate break back in, confirming normal, long strength. However, price came right back down to that pivot low to confirm strong short strength. And so at this point, that weekly bias was short. However, the following week, price came right up to these levels, up to this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here, and gave us a breakout and immediate break back in, which confirmed normal, short strength. However, price came right up to that pivot high to confirm strong, long strength. And so I was mentioning, if I could get a pullback to these 141.70 levels, I'll be willing to take a long entry with a stop loss at this pivot low and its main target way above. And although price did attempt to go to his main target, was shot down. And right at these levels right here, that new weekly long trade formed, which reset the lower time frame confirmations. And since the lower confirmations were reset, that weekly bias was neutral. And just this week, price came right down to that main target level right here without any lower time frame confirmation. Okay, so you always want to remember, during the holiday season and any other season really that has low liquidity, the biases tend to change over and over in terms of lower confirmation and as well as new higher time frame trades forming. Okay, so the bias on this pair also is back to neutral. So I'll be waiting for a new weekly or daily bias to form, and I'll keep you guys updated. All right, so let's go on to the NZD-USD pair. Okay, this is the monthly chart. Let's start off with an overview. So since there was strong long strength confirmed right here, from this trend line, from this pivot to this pivot right here, with a breakout and immediate break back in, however, price reaching its pivot high to create strong long strength. However, this year, price was consecutively rejected to the downside, which shows that there was an override of this strong long strength confirmed at this point right here, which shows strong short strength. And moreover, there's actually a possibility of strong short strength forming with a breakout and immediate break back in of this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. And if price reaches this pivot low, strong short strength will be confirmed. So seeing that there is a combination of strong short strength created from this override, and moreover the possibility of new strong short strength being confirmed at this pivot low, in the long term, I'm short biased, right back down to this pivot low right here. And moreover, on the weekly chart, since there was a long trade that formed right here, and a short trade that formed right here, and I'm still waiting for the lower time frame confirmations to confirm this weekly bias. In the short term, I'm neutral biased. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, so on this weekly chart, the last long trade that formed was right here. And the last short trade that formed was last week, right here. Now, first of all, let's go and see what's providing long strength for this long trade and short strength for this short trade. So let's go over to the monthly chart. Okay, so on this monthly chart, that weekly long trade I just showed you formed right here. And that weekly short trade formed in this area right here. Now, there's actually nothing providing short strength for that weekly short trade. And there's actually only this gap right here providing opposing strength which means the short strength for that weekly short trade is actually in the negative. Okay, because that short trade is running right into this gap right here. Okay, so let me show you the levels for that. Okay, so this upper level right here is at 0.6388 and the lower end is at 0.6371. All right, so let me zoom out here. All right, and that weekly long trade formed in this area right here, right? Now, first of all, we have this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. Okay, as you can see, it has 3 touches on it, which makes it legitimate. So this monthly trend line is actually providing long strength for that weekly long trade. And then moreover, we have 2 gaps right here also providing long strength. Okay, so let me zoom back in. Okay, so the upper level for this lower gap right here is at 55.946 and the lower end is at 55.75. Okay, and this upper gap right here, the top end is at 57.62 and the lower end is at 57.47. Okay, so again, we had that trend line that runs right through this level, providing long strength, as well as these 2 gaps providing long strength also. And there is actually one gap right here that's providing short strength because that long trade is running right into it. Okay. All right, so let me just show you that gap level too. Okay, so the upper level is at 58.38 and the lower level is at 58.21. All right, so seeing that this long trade actually has some long strength on it through these 2 gaps and this trend line, while this short trade actually has negative short strength on it, again, because that short trade is running right into this gap. Going strictly from these price elements, there seems to be more long strength than short strength. Okay, but the lower confirmations always have the ultimate say in terms of these biases. So let me show you what I'll be looking for in terms of lower confirmations. Let's go over to the 4-hour chart. Okay, so on this 4-hour chart, try drawing this trend line from this pivot to this pivot. Now, if price could come up to this trend line, break it out, and immediately break back in, that'll confirm normal short strength. However, price comes right back up to that pivot high. That means price overrided that normal short strength to create strong long strength. Now, moreover, if we could get a V-shaped recovery right at this point, that's going to confirm extreme short strength and confirm that weekly bias to be short. Now, in this pair's case, I much rather have lower confirmation to confirm short strength, and that's because the stop loss is at this pivot high right here, which is much closer than the stop loss for a long trade. Okay, so what I'll be looking for is this extreme short strength to be confirmed while giving me a nice pullback close to this stop loss level for a short entry. Okay, so that's just a scenario that I would like, but it doesn't mean it's going to happen. So we're just going to have to see what happens with this one, and I'll keep you guys updated. All right, so let's go on to the Euro Pound pair. All right, this is the weekly chart. Let me run you by the current setup I was looking at. So the last weekly long trade that formed was right here, and the last weekly short trade that formed was right here about 2 months ago. And so I was waiting for lower time frame confirmation to confirm this bias. And so as price fell down to these levels right here, if you recall, because it's the holiday season and liquidity is low, I was mentioning I was waiting for 4-hour and above lower confirmation. Okay, and that's because in illiquid markets, the lower time frame confirmations tend to reset in both ways over and over. And one way to resolve that problem is to only confirm biases on the relatively higher time frames. Okay, but in this case, I did not get a 4-hour and above lower confirmation, and this week price came up to that weekly bias's main target level right here. Okay, but that said, there actually was 1-hour confirmation that confirmed this bias to be long. Okay, so let me go ahead and show you that. Let's go over to the 1-hour chart. Okay, so on this 1-hour chart, try drawing this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. Right at this point right here, got a breakout, an immediate break back in, confirming normal, short strength, but price coming right back up to that pivot high to create strong long strength and confirming that weekly bias to be long. And throughout the last week and a half, price came up to its main target, and just this week, that main target was hit. Okay, but again, since I was waiting for 4-hour and above confirmation to form, I didn't take this long entry. And one thing to keep in mind is that although in this case, the 1-hour confirmation did confirm that weekly bias to be long, again, a lot of times in illiquid markets, the lower confirmations tend to override each other. And so it's still a good idea to wait for the relatively higher time frame confirmations to form to confirm a bias in illiquid markets. Okay, so also on this pair, the weekly bias is reset, so I'll be waiting for a new weekly or daily bias to form, and I'll keep you guys updated.
Okay, so as well as understanding how biases and lower confirmations work, it's also very important to understand how to read current price. Or in other words, you want to learn how to predict what will happen in the next hour by reading the current hour's candlestick. Now, having a general idea of what will happen in the next hour as opposed to what will happen in the next day or weeks, it's going to give you the ability to maneuver within a bias. So for example, if I was trading the Aussie yen bias that I just showed you aggressively, I could have entered short with a bigger stop loss because I knew there was a lot of selling pressure through the consecutive rejection candles. Okay, and the first step in understanding how to read current price is by understanding how to read basic candlesticks. So if you haven't done so already, please check out the lesson Candlesticks Basics. Okay, so that's it for the weekly forecast. I hope you guys have a great week, guys. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.